What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. Got a great show for you guys today. This is the Arkansas versus Cincinnati primer. We're going to dive deep into all aspects of this game. We also got a special guest, Josh Pate from the Late Kick with Josh Pate, going to join us a little bit later. All that and more on today's episode of Hog Sports Live. And before we get started, of course, I want to remind you there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live. If you haven't followed the page yet, become one of 90,000 Razorback fans to do so. Throw us a like on this video if you're enjoying it. Also, subscribe to our YouTube page. Throw us a thumbs up there and hit the notifications bell so you're alerted anytime we upload new videos. Also available on Apple Podcasts. We had just one review after last week's Ask. One person reviewed. It was a former Razorback. I really appreciate that review. Says he tunes into every show. And, available anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, all those platforms. And Hog Sports is just $1 right now for your first month, but I'm going to encourage you not to sign up today. Okay, just wait till 11 o'clock tonight. Okay, we got a real big special coming up. All right, that's all I'm going to say. Just wait till tonight to sign up at Hog Sports. You're going to want to join in on that. Okay. All right, where are we going first? What do you guys want to talk about? So, should be a pretty incredible atmosphere. I don't know if it'll compare to like the Texas game last year, but, people are anxious for football season. It's going to be a great crowd. Texas wasn't even 76,000. I'm not even sure if that the official capacity. I've said before they need to get an intern just to go through and count the seats because we know there's not 76,000 seats there precisely. Especially if Texas is only 74,500 or so. So, should be a great crowd. Definitely over 70,000 going to be there. Obviously, a little bit different measuring stick of how they do tickets and stuff. But for those of you wondering about information, the top 25 matchup is the first one in an opener since 1980 when they took on Texas. First time that if Arkansas wins, this would be the first win they've had against a top 25 opponent in the opener since 1974 against USC. So, it's been a while to have a game like this opening things up. Game is on ESPN at 2:30 p.m. It's a great time slot. Great time to get recruits in, give you a little time to get lathered up at the tailgate, get into the game. It's not going to be cool. It's going to be 90 degrees, but it's going to be enjoyable. It's not going to be like those 90-degree days where the team sucks, right? This is going to be a battle, though. I mean, I think a lot of Razorback fans are confident. I think you should be confident. But Cincinnati's a team with a lot of tradition. And, they've won 10 games in 8 of the last 15 seasons. I mean, Luke Fickell has barely dropped any games in the last 4 years. Obviously, they lost a lot off last year's team, but they'll replace a lot too. It kind of brings me, when I think about Cincinnati a little bit, I think about some other teams from, not major conferences that have had a lot of success in the past. Boise State probably would be the measuring stick until Cincinnati. I mean, nobody's made a college football playoff, but Boise maybe 2006, 2009, maybe one of those years would have made a college football playoff as a mid-major type. The thing with Boise is, they would beat big teams. They wouldn't schedule. They obviously wouldn't play a lot. They didn't play in a major conference, but they played Oregon, I think, in 2009 to open the season. It was a very, pretty low-scoring game. I think that's when LeGarrette Blount hit that dude for Boise. I think that might have been that year. But anyway, 2006, 2009, Boise, Miami Ohio with Ben Roethlisberger. Utah, 2004, 2008, had a couple of undefeated teams. This is before they joined the Pac-12. TCU in 2010 had an undefeated season. This was before they joined the Big 12. UCF, obviously, UCF won 34-27 over a 10-3 Auburn team and claimed a national championship. Hawaii, 2007, they were really good that year. They got waxed, though, by Georgia. So there's only a few teams that, that kind of run through their schedule and, from a mid-major type of conference and then, play a big boy like at the end that, and beats them, kind of like Boise did with Oklahoma, the Statue of Liberty play. But, I think the biggest thing that we're going to notice about this game, first of all, the reason you shouldn't get too cocky, I should say. Confidence is different than cockiness. The reason you shouldn't get too cocky is because Cincinnati is very well coached. They've got a system that really works. They obviously have drawn talent there. They had 9 players drafted last year. When's the last time Arkansas had that? A quarterback drafted in the, 3rd round. Wide receiver, running backs all drafted pretty high. A couple of cornerbacks drafted extremely high. So they've got some to replace too. But I think what's going to be the biggest thing you're going to notice when you go out there for pregame warm-ups is just the size difference. Arkansas is going to be a much larger team, and that's going to stick out, I think, right off the bat. But that doesn't mean that Arkansas is going to be the better team or play better. There's so many intangibles, so many things to work through in an opening game that we're going to see unfold before our very eyes. Luke Fickell made a great point about it. You don't get a joint practice, you don't get a preseason game. It's like the only league. I mean, I remember in high school we played preseason games. You just jump right into it and boom, that's on your record, whatever happens. So I think it's a disadvantage for Cincinnati that they have to. They know who their starting quarterback is. They've already decided that. They're not going to tell everybody, but they've decided who their starting quarterback is. But for Cincinnati, going into that game with the unknown, I think is a challenge. And I don't want to rehash that because we talked about that a lot on Monday's show. I went back through, the history of quarterback battles where it's been 1A, 1B. So I don't want to go through all that again. But usually the guy that you name in camp doesn't always end up being the starter throughout, especially when it's a real battle. Not when it's just like this guy's the obvious choice. When it's a real competition like they have right now at Cincinnati. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out in that regard. Arkansas has their team captains, Jalen Cattle and KJ Jefferson. No big surprise. Bumper pool, not really a surprise either. Dalton Wagner, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but not a big surprise at all because, I think you could also say, Ricky Stromberg would have been a good candidate also, but Dalton Wagner certainly more than deserving in his 6th year, about to be a 4th-year starter with them at right tackle. Guy that I really always enjoy interviewing. Super positive dude. So those are your 4 captains, but again, could have been, a lot of guys. Simeon Blair would have been another good candidate for a captain. Curtis Wilkerson always comes out with keys to victory and 5 burning questions. We don't change the keys to victory very much, but we do the 5 burning questions. Well, the Hogs hit the ground running. So there's been a lot of talk about liquor and iced tea, obviously, this week, and it's going to be so over. You're going to get sick of hearing it because it's a great quote, but everybody's, using it. But to me, no matter what they throw at Arkansas, whether it's liquor or iced tea, if it's liquor and they come with all kinds of, they come with exotics and, they try to, maybe they don't come out in their 3-3-5, maybe a different look on defense, blitz a lot more from the linebackers. As I mentioned, blitzing from the secondary also. If they try to do all that stuff, to me, the best medicine is, probably the best thing to do is to stay sober and run the ball. Stay sober and run them over. That's probably the best medicine because you can run. Cincinnati gave up a pretty decent amount of rushing yards last year, almost 150 yards a game, which, probably about middle of the pack in the country. It's not just, an overwhelming amount, but they gave up some rushing yards last year. And so I would say, that's probably a good thing that you can count on, whether it's KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders, AJ Green, Rashad DeBinion, we'll probably see him some too, run the ball. But at the same time, use the run to set up the pass too, because, once those safeties start creeping up a little bit, then you're going to want to hit them over the top of the pass. That's a good question too, is Arkansas's receivers as good as advertised? That's number 2 on Curtis's list. Are Arkansas, by the way, congrats to Curtis Wilkerson getting married this weekend. I mentioned last week it's the only time they could get the venue, so they're getting married on a Sunday also. So congratulations to Curtis and Michelle. Are the Razorbacks receivers as good as advertised? Man, I'm going to eat a lot of crow. I have said also, I'm going to eat a lot of crow, I should say, if I'm wrong. I have said, though, also that, can they take what they're doing in the practice field to the game field? That's the big question because in practice, they look great. I think it's a great-looking group of wide receivers, maybe the best-looking total group since 2010. I know they had, or 2011, I should say. But I know they have, they lost Traylon Burks and everything. But I'm talking about the whole group of wide receiver. I'm not talking about the best wide receiver maybe in program history. I'm talking about, 1 through 12, and especially 1 through 4. I think this is a really intriguing group. I think it's definitely the longest group of wide receivers that we've seen. Matt Landers, I think, is going to be a guy that's physical after the catch, a guy that you don't want to tackle, and a guy that, if you hit him in stride, he's gone. 200 meters, probably, maybe the fastest 200-meter guy on the team. Jaden Hazelwood, more of a tough catch guy, a guy that turns into a running back after the catch. And, Warren Thompson, I like Warren Thompson in the end zone. He's doing a lot of things that, to me, Traylon Burks did in low red zone work in practice last year. But none of that stuff matters. They got to take it to the game field. Will they be in sync with KJ Jefferson? I think they will. But I've talked them up pretty good bit. Is Arkansas's revamped D-line up for the challenge? Last year Arkansas brought in 3 key transfers on the defensive line, and all 3 of them started. This year they brought in 3 key transfers on the defensive line, and they're all 3 right now backups. Now, obviously the guys that are returning, I think, are better than they were last year. But what is Eric Gregory better than Markel Utze? Is Zach Williams or Jashad Stewart, are they better than Trey Williams was last year? Is Isaiah Nichols better than John Ridgeway? The thing that I don't think people realize or maybe remember about Isaiah Nichols, first of all, he's logged quite a bit of starts under his belt in his career, but he comes off the ball really fast. He's 6'3", 315 now, and I can remember when he was about 280, 290 or so, just thinking, man, he really comes off the ball well. So he's obviously added weight each of those last couple of years. Last year he played about 300 pounds. So he's the biggest he's been in his career. But you got to have those backups play. It's the group that gets more tired than any other position on the field. You got to have the backups play. How will things shake out at cornerback? I think it'll be Hudson Clark, Dwight McGlothern. But I think you'll also see a pretty steady rotation of those guys. Either they're really deep at cornerback or they got a lot of problems at cornerback, because it seems like the most unsettled position. And, of course, will Cincinnati make the right call at quarterback? I like Prater just because of his potential. I don't think you can measure running ability and stuff in camp, but Ben Bryant's got a big arm. I think they'll go with Ben Bryant. I think that's what most people are expecting. Keys to victory almost always remain the same: penalties, turnovers, special teams. I call it the TPS report. Injuries always play a big factor also. Arkansas's stayed pretty healthy on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe a benefit of them not tackling live. Will that play a factor in this game? They tackled in individual drills in, more controlled environment, and they just did thud up in the 2 scrimmages. But Arkansas is overall they came out of all of camp and everything healthy. They got they had a couple guys banged up here and there, but nothing long term at all. Nothing that's going to cause anybody to miss the first game. Torian Carter was injured in the spring. Dominic Johnson, these were all injuries that were before camp. So they've done pretty good. And then, of course, we always add a bonus one, and it's iced tea or liquor. What will Arkansas's liquor be? What will their liquor be to combat if Cincinnati wants that kind of party? Malik Hornsby? If you're very aggressive, Arkansas has done very good on counters. We could see a lot of counters in the run game. Try to exploit their speed, work their speed against them. There's just a lot of unknowns with Cincinnati. Their offensive line is similar. They got all the starters back. They got one guy that's kind of banged up. They moved the right tackle into right guard. They have a former walk-on at right tackle that they really like. Got a battle going on, I believe, at left guard also from a returning starter and a sophomore. So they've got some action going there on the offensive line still, even though they return all the starters. And then, you flip to Arkansas's defensive line, the matchup there. It's an experienced group because they're not starters all returning, but they're all the top backups. Like everybody but the starters are returning on the defensive line. So they've got, guys that have played a lot of ball, because your starters generally only play about 60% of the snaps anyway. Plus they got, they boosted the defensive line with some transfer stuff. So we'll see how that shakes out. That's an interesting thing to watch. Is Arkansas good on the defensive line, or are they average? Cincinnati's got to replace their top 2 leading rushers. One of them, obviously, Desmond Ridder. Jerome Ford also, who was drafted by Cleveland in the 5th round. But the other 2 guys, Ryan Montgomery, Charles McClellan, both pretty experienced backs. Montgomery led them with 6.8 yards per carry last year, had 312 yards. So, those guys have run the ball. If you look at Cincinnati versus Power 5 run defense, Cincinnati put up 172.6 rushing yards a game last season, majority of those against American Athletic Conference opponents, which is fourth in the AAC. They racked up 247 yards against Miami, Ohio last year. So when they faced Power 5 opponents, and including Notre Dame, obviously, they included major conference opponents in Notre Dame. They ran for 118 yards, 93 yards, and 74 yards. That was against Indiana Hoosiers, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Alabama Crimson Tide. They averaged 3.1 yards a carry. So a significant drop in production on the running game versus playing those AAC opponents, which obviously you would expect. A lot of questions about Arkansas run defense. Got to replace a bunch at linebacker. Got Drew Sanders in. Bumper pool returns with 125 tackles. Jalen Catalon's a sure tackler. Monteric Brown was a really good tackling cornerback. Will that be missed? That's a good question. Arkansas finished 9th in the SEC in 2021 with 153.9 rushing yards allowed per game. So tougher opponents that they face, but average, giving up more than Cincinnati did. Although, they held Bijan Robinson to 69 yards on 19 carries in week 2. Texas running back stud. Obviously, there's a secret at quarterback. We talked about that a little bit. Will it be Prater? Will it be Bryant? We think it'll be Ben Bryant. We think we'll also see Prater. I think you can almost count on that. I guess unless Bryant comes in and just lights it up, maybe not. Maybe they don't want to mess with it. They got to replace Alec Pierce, who was drafted last year also, or in April, I should say. Arkansas's got to replace Traylon Burks, kind of a similar deal for them. Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, both very fast, and they were the second and third options last year. Jaden Thompson has some experience also. And both of those tight ends returned, Josh Wiley, Leonard Taylor, both the top 2 tight ends. Wiley actually led them in catches in 2020 in the shortened season. It was only 28 catches, but he led them. Will the secondary be a strength of the defense? I think it could be, especially when you talk about the safeties. And injury report looking pretty clean. Looking pretty clean for Arkansas on the injury report. So how does Arkansas match up with Cincinnati defense? They returned a lot of defensive playmakers. I kind of went over this back, the other day, but so I don't want to go into that too much. But the interesting battle, they've got to replace some linebackers. They got to replace their top 2 cornerbacks from last year. One of the cornerbacks was a first-round draft pick, and the other guy won the Thorpe Award. So that's a lot to replace. They got to replace the top 2 linebackers, although they like their linebackers. They like the backups. They played a significant amount of snaps for them last year. Get a bunch back on the defensive line. So normally we'd have Curtis, because we split this deal up. That's why I'm not like as in the know on this side of the ball, because Curtis handles this side of the ball, and then I'll handle the other side of the ball, and then we'll have Curtis on Thursday's show to kind of talk about it. But obviously he's getting married in Virginia, for those who don't know. Send Curtis a gift. It'll be really interesting to see how Arkansas starts out also. There's been a lot of talk about whether you take the ball if you win the toss. I say you defer to the second half. I just think that's smart football. I don't think you try to win the game right off the bat, try to win the game in the second half. I prefer personally, like, coming to the end of the half and knowing if I have the ball here, I may get back-to-back possessions. Or if I don't have the ball, it's not a big deal because I still get it, versus they have the ball, they score right before half, and they get the ball back. That can be a backbreaker. So, to me, always defer to the second half. Take the ball in the second half. But Arkansas has gotten off to a little bit of a slow start in recent games where they had a long layoff. They didn't start off very well last year. I've mentioned many times 13 penalties, 117 yards, fumble in the opening kickoff, 10-7 down at halftime, down in the third quarter. I think it was 17-10 at one point. Didn't start off very well last year. Obviously, Georgia, now that's not defensive, but offensively. Georgia started off great defensively in 2020. Not a very good start on offense. Obviously, you're facing Georgia, so it's maybe a little bit different. And the Outback Bowl game against Penn State, they didn't just, they didn't set the world on fire on offense coming out of the gate either. So will Arkansas change that narrative a little bit in this one and come out and have a great start? I don't know if I talked about who's the best Arkansas wide receiver, but I talked, I mentioned this to Sam Pittman Wednesday, his last press conference with us, and just he kind of feels the same as I do, just changing your mind every single week on who's the best wide receiver. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And, KJ's development, is he faster because he shed a little bit of weight? Still listed at 240, but he looks a little bit slimmer. Is he faster? Is he still as buck as he was? What's the relationship with those wide receivers? All right. How many people we got watching? Because you want to be on right now because we got Josh Pate coming up. So I'm going to go to my man Josh Pate. Pate's coming into town. For those of you who don't know, we had our suspicions that Pate was going to come to Fayetteville for the Cincinnati game, but he will be here for the Cincinnati game as part of his tour. He goes to a different place each week, so him and his crew are coming into town. We're going to make sure they get all squared away. Josh, how you doing, man?
Emmett. Hey.
So, Josh Pate joining us. Again, you can follow Josh on Twitter at LateKickJosh. He's also the host of The Late Kick with Josh Pate, which you can watch on YouTube. Does a fantastic job. Maybe a closet Razorback fan. I don't know if anybody quite gets, from the national media, quite gets what it means to be a Razorback more than you do, Josh. Welcome to the show.
Well, I appreciate you, Biddy. I answered the phone like you were calling me from a prison because I had video playing, so there were two voices at once. So that's why that sounded like that. Look, I don't have to be closeted. I specifically structure our show so that I can have all the biases, I guess is the plural there, that I want. So, I am not even hiding my excitement. I'm going to get on a plane in a few hours. I'm coming to see you guys. About 60% of the reason to cover an Arkansas game is to collaborate with Trey Biddy. I'll admit that out there too. So a lot of excitement, not just because it's week one either.
Yeah, it's super excited to have you coming in. I've kind of told people, look, he's coming. He may not know he's coming yet, but he's coming. And yeah, we're now you were there for the Texas A&M game last year, but that was in Arlington. So this is your first trip to Razorback Stadium. So what are you expecting to get out of it? I mean, you've been to so many places now. What are you expecting to see on Saturday in Fayetteville? What are your pregame expectations? Yeah.
So last year, week 2, when Texas came in there, I was in Ames, Iowa for Iowa State versus Iowa. And I didn't regret a lot of the trips I made last year. And I'm not saying I regret going up there, but I regret having missed the environment that I saw later that day at Razorback Stadium. And I made it a point then and there that we were not going to let next season go by without getting there. So, first chance we got, we're coming over there. I think it is one of the most underrated home atmospheres in America right now, only because I think the country's been a little slow to come around, Trey. You guys get it. It's happening in your backyard. I get it because I'm paying attention. I don't think a lot of the nation gets not just what Sam Pittman's doing, but it's kind of a groundswell around there. And if you're there, I'm not explaining anything new to you, but if you live in Evansville, Indiana, it may be weird. You may say, why are people talking about Arkansas so much? Well, turn on the TV Saturday, just like I did last year. Turn on the TV last year. Listen to the Texas players afterwards. Listen to Steve Sarkisian. Look at the deer in the headlights look on the faces of people who play in major venues a lot. I imagine we may see this with Cincinnati Saturday. It's not their first go-around. They've played in big moments. But, I think one of the key points of this game that we're going to talk about a little bit is I don't care who is playing quarterback for Cincinnati. It's going to be a first-timer on this level, and they got to walk into the teeth of that stadium at 3:30, man. Week 1 energy, especially in that place, is no joke. So I think it's going to be incredible and can't wait to be a part of it.
Josh Pate joining us again, Late Kick Josh on Twitter, and check out his YouTube. If you guys aren't familiar with Josh Pate's show, you do such a great job, and you're in a new studio now, and just a tremendous job that you guys are doing. So, Josh, what did you think about Sam Pittman and his comment about about bringing iced tea or liquor. I mean, one of the greatest quotes of the college football season already, and we haven't even kicked off the season.
Well, Pittman's like that. You know, the best coaches out there, I have found this is the case with preachers and coaches. They always have a little anecdote. They always have a saying, and a lot of times they don't even have to laugh when they say it because they're not really even meaning to be joking. It's just the natural way that they see the world. And that's how Sam Pittman is. A lot of these old school ball coaches are like that because Trey, Biddy, what they've had to do for so long is they've had to take what's happening in their world that they really know the general public doesn't have a clue about, and they've had to metaphorically translate it to the general public, and they've developed that ability so much that they have a little anecdote, they have a little turn of phrase for every single possible sentence and possible scenario in life. So when he said it, you know, I loved that the rest of the country laughed at it because I think a lot of us looked at it and said, no, that's just Sam Pittman, man. That's how he is all the time. He's not putting on an act for you.
What are you hoping to get out of this weekend, Josh? I mean, I don't want you to tell everywhere you're going to be and what you plan to do, but just kind of a rough idea of like what a college weekend for you kind of has been in the past and what you're expecting out of Fayetteville.
Yep. So we'll get in there tonight. Gonna hang out. Well, I'm gonna hang out with you tomorrow. I don't know if you know that or not, but I'm gonna hang out with you tomorrow. I want to get around town. You know, I want to take it in because I've been to Fayetteville before, but not on a football Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have some obligations over at the stadium in the morning with CBS, so we'll do some live hits. But then, you know, my time is mine up until about 2 hours before kickoff. So I'll get around. I'm going to go visit the Broyles family. A lot of them I have never visited before, so I'm going to go catch up with them. I am going to make it a point to get around the venue because I've never been inside the stadium. I always love to do that. I'm fascinated by the architecture of these venues and watching the road team come in, looking at the difference between home and road accommodations, which can be glaring in the SEC sometimes. So a lot of that I look forward to, but also, man, my favorite part of this stuff is when we're in the building early and then they open the door for the general public, because from that point, and that point where you hear those faint police sirens and you know that means teams are about to arrive, from that point up until they turn the lights out that night, you're on the clock and you're getting to do the best job on the face of this earth. So that's what I'm looking to get out of Saturday. And the good thing about that, Trey, is it always delivers.
Yep, it absolutely does. Josh Pate joining us, a late kick with Josh Pate. What about this matchup? I know you're high on Arkansas, Josh, but Cincinnati is a team that is used to winning. They've got a great culture there. Luke Fickell obviously getting it done. And usually a lot of times with these teams you think, you know, they're really well coached, but they're going to be outmanned. This is a team that had 9 players drafted in the NFL last year. I don't know that Arkansas has even had that happen before. So they obviously attract talent there. It's a different environment for them, obviously coming down to Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium, playing an SEC team right off the bat. But what do you think is going to happen in this one? How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, so I love to just strip away the logos, and I love to look at teams sort of in a database format, just look at numbers. And I don't mean like passing statistics and rushing statistics, but I love to plug all this stuff into our model. And the way I've explained this to folks is pretend they're wearing Florida jerseys, pretend they're wearing LSU jerseys. And the reason I say that is because our computer has, I think, LSU 24, Cincy 25, and Florida 26. So I think a lot of folks, not locally, but I think a lot of folks regionally would take this game more serious if there were that Gator logo or LSU logo coming in there. But the quality of team is every bit what you would get out of LSU in Florida. You know as well as I do, Trey, every week one of every season, there's an upset that happens somewhere, or either there's a really competitive game, and even if the favorite wins, you're watching it and you're saying, there are 2 or 3 names that popped off of this TV screen that I had never heard about. They weren't in my preview magazines, or if they were just in passing. And that's how life is. If we're not talking about Bama and Ohio State, where everyone knows every player on the roster, some of these teams that are really good in eval and development, they have guys ready. It's just you and I may not know their names as much as we will after they play. I think that's the kind of game we'll see Saturday. I think you'll see a knife fight. And I especially am looking forward to a lot of the offensive line changes in staff, but a lot of the returning pieces Cincinnati has, and a lot of that transfer change that Arkansas has had up front. You know, that's fascinating to watch to me. because you hope that things have gelled. You hope that, for example, I've read a lot of your work this week about how you balance working to the thud in practice, but then looking to clean up missed tackles on game day, because as you have mentioned, Cincinnati was well off pace in yards per rush and yards per game last year against the higher level competition. Does that manifest itself Saturday? Because, man, that's it. If you can get them in obvious pass downs, and then you take your chances on a first-time starter for them on the road in your backyard with the secondary I think that Arkansas has, you should win that game. That's how I think it'll go. I just think that I may be wrong. Anyone expecting this thing to be cruise control in the second half, I don't necessarily know has a firm grip on what kind of program Cincinnati is.
Absolutely. Again, you can follow him at Late Kick Josh on Twitter. Watch his show on YouTube, The Late Kick with Josh Pate. Just does a fantastic job. Josh, we're so excited to have you in town, and I think we got you all squared away. You got your hotel. You guys, CBS kind of scrambling, get you all settled down, but you got a good place to stay, and got everything worked out for tomorrow and Saturday. We can't wait to see you. So I had some more. I don't have any more questions for you because you get so much information out in a short amount of time, which is a really good trait. So we just look forward to seeing you on tomorrow and on Saturday.
All right, brother. Hey, everyone else listening, looking forward to seeing you guys. Can't wait to get up there.
All right, Josh. Appreciate you, brother. All right, everybody. How great was that? Josh Pate just does a fantastic job covering college football all the way around. If you're a Razorback fan and you haven't checked out his show, I would hope that interview right there, gets you going. So does a great job. Definitely something to watch every single week. Dude gets a lot of I had some questions for him, but he goes so fast and he has so much information. There's not just a lot of dead words in there that I'm just left at the end, just kind of like, okay, I think we covered it. I didn't want to give away a bunch of stuff like where he's planning on going and stuff, just to keep the horde away from him, because I know everybody would want to come up and shake that dude's hand because he does such a good job. Like a lot of national people, a lot of national analysts and stuff, all they do is with hot takes and say a bunch of controversial stuff. And, that's kind of how they make their living. Josh and his team do the research. They have great takes. They don't rely on they'd be negative sometimes, but they don't rely on negativity to get their point across. So that's one of the things I think that really separates Josh Pate from a national standpoint is they do the research. It's not hot takes. It's really well thought out analysis, and it's fun at the same time. So great guest to have on with us. Where are we headed next? I don't know how we can top that, really. Can we top it? No, can't beat it. A lot of recruiting stuff going on, obviously. On 9/1 at midnight, coaches could reach out to juniors. Isn't that calendar so messed up? You hear about offers and all this stuff. They haven't even reached out to them yet. August 1st is the first day that you can receive an official written scholarship. August 1st for a senior in high school. Arkansas's commit list is almost filled up, and now they can finally offer him scholarships officially. The calendar's just so messed up. They just need to move that. I don't see to me, you should be able to offer a written scholarship to anybody you want. If you want to offer an 8th grader then a written scholarship, you should be able to do it then. I think it would lower the amount of 8th graders that are receiving written scholarships because a lot of coaches just say it. You say you get a scholarship because you don't want to get cut from a player's list before you even had time to evaluate them. So this is where things are. August 1, seniors can receive scholarship offers. Juniors can start hearing from Hog coaches on September 1st. Danny's got a nice breakdown of all the guys that were contacted by Arkansas last night. And, obviously it's going to continue on. Layden Blocker, Arkansas commit for the class of 2023, has received his composite 5-star ranking. Big time. 6'2", 175-pound point guard. He is ranked the number 25 prospect in the entire country on the composite, number 4 point guard, and number 2 in Kansas. He plays at Sunrise Christian. So, but he's an Arkansan. So congratulations to Layden Blocker, yet another 5-star on Arkansas. Danny West always comes up with the top 10 recruits signed by Arkansas, and last year that list changed a lot, and I guess it'll continue to change. This is like, all time. Danny also has a really great article. One of my favorite things he does is recruiting battles, Arkansas versus Cincinnati. Now, obviously, you wouldn't expect a whole lot of recruiting battles, but he breaks down some other things. Cincinnati's top 5 highest rated current players: Evan Prater, Leonard Taylor, Corey Kenner, Blue Smith, Jawan Briggs. Also Arkansas's Jaden Hazelwood, Drew Sanders, Landon Jackson, Isaiah Satania, Hudson Henry, top 5 recruits. But he breaks down everything, the roster by state. A lot of Texas flavor, a lot of Arkansas, obviously, a lot of Georgia lately. I'll tell you what's interesting, there's only one player from Louisiana on Arkansas's roster. Cincinnati, dominated by the state of Ohio, as they should be. They're in Cincinnati. 72 from the state of Ohio. 72. There are 10 Arkansas players who had Cincinnati offers. So not a lot of cross-recruiting between those two. And only 3 for Cincinnati who had Arkansas offers. But he breaks down all that stuff. Team recruiting rankings year by year over the last, 5 years. Transfer class ranking, all that stuff you can find at HawgSports under Danny West articles. Again, you need a VIP subscription. But as I mentioned, it's $1 for your first month right now. But just wait. Just wait till Friday night. No. Wait till Thursday night at 11 because we're Central Times. So Thursday night at 11, just get on the site. We've got something, we'll run through the weekend. So today's not the day to sign up until 11 o'clock. Predictions. How do we see it playing out? So many unknowns with the first game. 6-point spread. I like Arkansas to cover that. I think it may be a little more low scoring. I went 34-24. I just look at some trends with, when schools that are, programs that are really big from, mid-major type group of 5 conferences, I should say, when they're really good from those type conferences and they play. Now, the 2006 Oklahoma Boise game was maybe an exception, but when they play out of conference, usually the score is a little bit lower when they play a really good team. And that's why I think maybe they're bringing Ice-T, kind of sit and, bide their time a little bit, try to keep the game going into the fourth quarter versus rolling the dice a lot. So I'm thinking maybe Ice-T in this one for Cincinnati. But that's kind of how I see it playing out, try to keep the score low and try to win the game in the fourth quarter for Cincinnati. But I think Arkansas will be just a little bit too much. So I went 34-24 Arkansas. I think if Cincinnati wins, we're talking about like a 21-17 Cincinnati win. If Arkansas wins, it could be still low scoring, but I think it'll probably be more, Arkansas scoring in the 30s, a little high, more slightly higher scoring game. How good was Josh Pate? I was kind of stumbling at the end. I was like, I don't have any more questions for you. I hope to see you soon, Josh. Bye. It wasn't the sharpest ending to an interview like that. All right, we're going to go to some questions now. We've got a few more minutes. Clay Simpson says he wants a HawgSports t-shirt. I'm thinking about opening a little store for some gear. Christopher Stein says, are you surprised with Vandy's win over Hawaii, 63-10? I mean, it didn't start off like it was going to be, anything close to that. But, that quarterback that they have, he's Arkansas offered him with the previous staff. They really liked him. So I'm not surprised that he, especially Danny really liked the kid. But I'm not surprised that he, has turned out to be a baller. So Patrick Baker says, I must just like your voice because most of the time you literally just say what the coach says in his press conference, but I always watch it anyway. That's not true. I have my own takes. I don't believe that. Does other people believe that? Am I just regurgitating what Sam Pittman says? Is that the whole show? I hope not. I mean, I am interacting in that press conference, which again is what I say separates me from a lot of other media reporters out there and a lot of shock jocks and whatnot is, I talk about what I see at practice because I'm there, what happened at the press conference because I'm the one, one of the ones asking questions. I think I probably ask more questions than anybody. But and a lot of people you don't get that from. They just say that most people are reporting what reporters are reporting. They're using me as a middleman, and then they go talk about what I said. But maybe I am. Maybe I'm just regurgitating Sam Pittman. Maybe it's because I'm sitting there talking with him. I don't know. I hope that's not true. Let me know in the comments if you think that's true, and I'm going to change it. Can't wait to watch us get this. Can't wait to watch us get this win and watch the walk and talk. I'm not nervous about the walk and talk because I just do it. But there is, because you can't rehearse the walk and talk. And I always think, I don't rehearse this show. I put some notes up, and I kind of go from there. And, sometimes that's bad and sometimes it's good. I think people probably prefer a little bit of more casual approach and, speaking off the top of my head, which is what the walk and talk is all about. So that's kind of makes you a little nervous because you don't really know what's going to come out of my mouth when I'm doing it. There's no okay, I'm going to hit this point, hit this point, hit this point on my walk and talk. It's not like that. Prediction on which team will score the first touchdown? Cincinnati. I don't know. Arkansas. Will you be doing the pregame questionnaire and postgame statistics? Pregame questionnaire. Postgame statistics. I'm not sure what you mean exactly, Justin. Joey Burns says, do you think Cincinnati will test us by running the ball to see if we can stop the run early? Yeah, I think they will. I mean, they ran for a pretty decent amount of yardage last year. Now, I mentioned what they did against, major college teams in Notre Dame. Not that impressive. I really think that our passing game is going to surprise teams this year. I'm hoping what we do, Cincinnati will also run. Christopher Stein says, love Josh's podcast. Yeah, it's great. Brian Malone says, what's the attendance going to look like Saturday? I think it'll be north of 70. I mean, there's always people that wake up and I don't know when to go to the game. Maybe somebody gets too inebriated and doesn't make it into the game. So, and they go by tickets scanned. I don't know if they go by tickets sold as much as tickets scanned. I'm not sure on that. Maybe need to get some clarification because it's changed a lot. It used to be estimated. They used to say okay, this is how many tickets were sold. This is how many media people, how many concession people, referees, teams, staffers, coaches, ushers, all of that stuff used to be factored in. I talked to Rick Schaefer about how they used to do it. That's why the largest crowd in Razorback Stadium history probably won't be broken because it's an estimated crowd. It's the Alabama game in 2010, I think. I mean, they've added 4,000 seats to the stadium. You can't tell me that Texas wasn't the largest crowd in the history of Razorback Stadium, but it was 7,400 something. A couple thousand shy. I mean, the record's 76,000 something when the stadium was 72,000 seats. So that will never be broken until they change that or go back and revise it. Randy Smith says, we don't know how many seats are in the stadium still to this day. We don't know an exact number. I guarantee you it didn't go from exactly 72,000, which I also think was estimated, to exactly 76,000. Hope this secondary can play some man so they can get after the quarterback a little more. I mean, that's what they think they can do. They think they're going to be able to play more man. So we'll see. They're not going to get a pass rush running a three-man front, 3-2-6 anyway. They're just not. Last year they were second to last in the SEC in sacks allowed. That will probably happen again if that's what they do, just because there's not a true edge guy. We will see some 3-3-5. We're going to see Drew Sanders line up on the line of scrimmage. It wouldn't surprise me to see that right out of the gate even. So that's probably where they aim to get the pass rush most. I think we could also see some, maybe not a 3-3-5. I mean, it's all that stuff's just kind of semantics, really. But I think we could see maybe a four-man front where they have a couple of defensive ends on the line of scrimmage. If they don't have Drew Sanders in, because that package 3-3-5 is really there for Drew Sanders. But I could also see them using that and maybe having Jashad Stewart as an extra guy out there. He may be next to another defensive end. I could see them doing something like that too. Trey, which player on offense and defense separates themselves as a star in game one? One of the wide receivers, potentially one of the wide receivers, and I'm not sure which one. And I think Drew Sanders I mean, everybody else has already, stamped that. So I would say maybe Drew Sanders. You can't say, Bumper Pool established it or Jalen Catalon established it. They've already done that. Adrian Lamb says, is T. Knox our sleeper player? I think he can be a difference maker in the red zone. Who is the sleeper player? There's going to be somebody. Nobody was talking about Dominic Johnson last year. I was a little bit. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I liked the guy from the spring that year when I was ready to move him to linebacker. And I was like, hey, you know what? This guy's got pretty good balance, pretty good tackle breaker, surprising speed. So who's going to be the surprise player? Because, you can think back year after year, there's always been somebody. Is it going to be one of the wide receivers? Is it going to be I say it was Dominic Johnson last year, but Warren Thompson kind of was that too. He was a guy that wasn't even put on scholarship until heading into week 4. And he'd had a 60-yard bomb the week before, a touchdown bomb. Had a couple catches against Texas before that. So who are going to be the guy? There's going to be somebody or maybe a couple of guys who are didn't expect that from him. And maybe the coaches have a little bit of an idea. I don't think that they knew about Dominic Johnson fully because it took him 8 weeks to get this, more than 6 carries in a game. But I think a red zone guy, first of all, I think that Jaden Hazelwood is a guy that can make really tough catches. So maybe he's a red zone guy. And from what I've seen in Warren Thompson, I think that he has a chance to be too. And then Matt Landers, 6'5". So Mac Farley says, when Cincinnati has played any high-level team, they've lost. They play in a weak conference. They beat Notre Dame. Indiana wasn't chopped liver last year. So I don't know if I would say that's entirely true. They lost to Alabama. A lot of teams lost to Alabama. Arkansas lost to Alabama. So I don't know if I would say that's entirely fair to say that they've just lost any high-level team they've played because that's not true. Do they play in a weak conference? It's out of the group of 5, it's probably the strongest. It's probably the 6th best conference in the country. Arkansas would have beaten them last year, man. Possibly. Yeah, it's possible. Definitely possible. I think Arkansas would have been the best team they played last year. Ben Luber says 2 days away from the next Trey Biddy Walk and Talk. Tyler Toba says Walk and Talk number 1. Christopher Stein says Walk and Talk. A lot of Walk and Talk. A lot of Walk and Talk. 42-14, big second half by Arkansas. David Mills says, love the show. Appreciate you. I got here late. Has Trey cussed yet? Nope, haven't cussed. Made it through the show without cussing. Outlook is fresh. Love the show. Appreciate that, everybody. I really appreciate all the praise. That's really nice to hear. It's good to know that people like what you're doing, right? I appreciate that. I am going to try to get to some questions, though. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. One guy, I'm going to read the review because I loved it. I really appreciate it, and I know he's watching because he says he watches every time. I'm going to read the review that this dude left, and I want you to leave a review, please. He was the only person that left a review, the only guy. After I said, please, if you like the show. Now, I know that, 749 people have left reviews, so there's a lot of people watching this show right now anyway. But on Apple Podcasts, it really helps. It really does. Love Trey, Danny, and gang. As a former Hog who doesn't respect a lot of opinions about football, especially my Hogs, I listen to every show. VIP subscriber. Appreciate that. I read the articles and watch YouTube practice clips. I even got a shout-out in an article about Sam. I think I remember that. The whole team is knowledgeable, personable, and interactive. Love how Trey can't hide his passion for the Hogs. He wears it on his sleeve. I don't know about that. It's a great review. I really appreciate that. Leave us 5 stars on the rating. If you don't want to leave a review, that's fine. You can just go in there and hit 5 stars. But we love to see the reviews. And if it's great, I'll read it on the air. Corey Atkin, dry heave. Maybe you add plenty of other content. Love your work. I'm not 100% sure. I know Josh Pate has a GIF where he's going like that. He sent it to me. I sent him back the one of me going when I said FUC. I was like, could you see Arkansas win 10, 11, and maybe 12 game and have an undefeated season, shocking Alabama, Texas A&M? I think 10 maybe. You got to get lucky. You know, I think back to like how lucky Tennessee got 98, obviously with the fumble situation. But before that, against Syracuse, there's like a completely phantom pass interference call, like in their opening game, where they get put in field goal range to win the game. You know, so like every team that wins the national championship got to get a little bit lucky. Think about Alabama when they won like you talk about the Hunter Henry Heave game that knocked Ole Miss out of the SEC championship. I mean, if that doesn't happen for Arkansas, then Alabama doesn't play in the SEC championship game and doesn't go on to win the national championship. Every team's got to have some luck, and maybe it's not your own luck in the game, it's somebody else's. But the ball has to bounce your way. I'm going to use the Houston Nutt quote. It's my favorite one. That ball don't bounce straight up and down. Yeah, Arkansas can win 10 games this year. I mean, I went through the schedule and did my picks, and I'm like, man, I like it. But where I had to pull myself back again is knowing the transfer portal has helped everybody. Okay? Just because I think this is the deepest, most balanced Arkansas team that I've ever covered in 19 years doesn't mean that everybody else isn't saying, man, we really filled some holes. And Arkansas hit, man. Like, that's one thing that I talk about is they hit on the transfer portal. Those guys are all factoring in. There's not a dud, and that's transfers. And did everybody have that experience? There's so many unknowns about this season. I think it's why it's so hard to pick. But do I have confidence that TJ Finley is a good quarterback or that Auburn is about to implode? No. But do I also know how, last year with Jashad Stewart forcing that fumble, how it was called stop forward progress? Do I know the year before where Oregon quarterback now, Nichols, spiked the ball behind him and Arkansas recovered the fumble, but they were still allowed to go on and win the game? Yeah, I know how that happened. Do I remember Tremaine Thomas stripping the ball at the goal line in 2010 and they still getting a touchdown? Yeah, I remember all that stuff. So that's kind of why I went with, like, I think they're going to win their home games, maybe aside from Alabama. That would be the one. But I think they're going to take care of the home games. But, it was hard for me to just say 10 wins. That's a big number. So I said, you know what? Maybe somebody scrounged them. I mean, you got to think, like, when we're looking at this game, like if Arkansas played each of these games week one, and we know that's not how it's going to be throughout the season. We know it's going to change. All right. But that's all we have to go on. But we know injuries are going to play a factor somewhere. Is it going to be positive for Arkansas or negative? Or injuries are going to play a factor. Man, they really need a bye. That kind of attitude. There are all sorts of things like that can play a role throughout the season and change your perception of how a game, matches up. Are they just down one week? Are they just not clicking on all cylinders? That's how it was the Auburn game last year. Just wasn't clicking on all cylinders. So, I just kind of went with, kind of a random, didn't show up kind of game. So I went with 9 wins. But 10 wins, absolutely. I think if I look at every single game right now on paper, I like Arkansas in 10 of the games. I think it's just a toss-up at Mississippi State. But I've got respect for Mike Leach, Will Rogers, that environment. Starkville, for those who haven't been to Starkville in a number of years, it's a lot different stadium than it was a decade ago. A lot different. And it's annoying. And, they cheat. They ring those cowbells. Can't tell me they're not going to ring the cowbells when the game's on the line. They may adhere through 3 quarters. Dustin Hoopen says this game might come down to big special teams play, big punt or kick return, big field goal to extend the lead. And that's where I like Arkansas's special teams. Factor that in. You see a close game. Well, do they have a returning starter at quarterback? No. How do they feel about the special teams? They got a better kicker than Cam Little? Probably not. Do you think we'll see Hornsby on an end around? Will they use some? I think we will see Malik Hornsby in some capacity. I think that's absolutely going to happen. Will Causey says, I want Surprise not to be a player but a fast start. Yeah. Stay sober and run them over. Absolutely. Need to get on them early, says Zach Van. Bring liquor to the walk and talk. That could be a problem. Josh mentioned upsets or close games week one. Let's see. What else we got? We're going to wrap it up with this from Christopher Stein. If you had a favorite team per conference, what is it? If you had a favorite team per conference in the D1 college football, who would it be? Mine are Arkansas, South Alabama. I'm getting so many things that's jumping. Wake Forest, Michigan State, Arizona State, a few other for all per conference. I change up a lot. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say there's a Big Ten team that I would like, kind of adopt as much as maybe would like to see fail. Ohio State. Michigan's probably on that list too, just for the way that they canceled the game. I was looking forward to going to the Big House, so that didn't sit well with me. I don't know if I'd say there's a team that I really adopt. It probably changes year to year. All right. I think we covered everything. It was a great interview with Josh Pate. I hate that I couldn't end it with a punch. I was just kind of left like, okay, because he covered so much. That is something that I always look for in a media person. Can you get out a lot of information in a short amount of time? Pate may be the best at that. So does a great job. Super thankful to have him on the show. Super thankful to have you guys on the show. We would not be able to do what we do. I love Josh Pate. You go to his Twitter, the thing that's pinned on there is, hey, thanks for letting us do this job. And I feel the exact same way. We could not do this work without you guys. As Danny West says, it's not hard work, but we work really hard at it. So thank you to all you guys for enjoying our free content, and especially to our subscribers for signing up for our VIP subscription. Again, it's just a secret. I'm not supposed to really announce this, but we're not doing the show tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure everybody knows. Wait till 11 o'clock Thursday night. We got something for you. Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Next time I talk to you guys, I'll be walking around, leaving the stadium. Hopefully we'll have some good stuff to say. You never know how it's going to play out week 1. All right, everybody. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com. Coming to you from HawgSports Studios. Next time will be from Razorback Stadium. And we'll catch you next time.